Hello and welcome to the Shakespeare Podcast. In this episode, we continue the exploration of King Lear by looking at the story of Edgar. It may seem strange to us that so little attention is given to the character of Edgar, who spends most of the play disguised as the mad beggar Poor Tom. This lack of attention stems from the 19th and 20th century Shakespeare scholars who emphasise the centrality of King Lear in the play to the exclusion of everything else. To more modern eyes, it seems strange to marginalise Edgar, who plays a central role in both the tragedy of his father, the Duke of Gloucester, and a central role in the decline of King Lear. As Poor Tom, Edgar is our witness to Lear's madness and impotence. It is through these sufferings, Edgar tells us later in Act 5, that he has become, quote, pregnant to good pity. In short, Edgar is the closest thing that King Lear has to a hero. Edgar as Poor Tom is naked like Christ crucified. It is Edgar that Lear takes for a philosopher. It is Edgar who shows compassion for his father and saves him from his intended suicide. It is Edgar who kills Oswald and discovers the plot to murder Albany. And finally, in the big fight scene, it's Edgar who defeats Edmund in single mortal combat. At the end of the play, it's Edgar who must, quote, rule in this realm and the gored state sustain. And so it is Edgar who has the last say. The final lines of the play belong to the new king, whose message is one of conciliation between the generations. So if Shakespeare's King Lear shows us the decline, madness and death of one king, it also shows us the rise and formation of a new king. I don't think this is accidental. I think Shakespeare is laying out point by point to his patron, King James I, what makes a king, and in particular, what makes a great king. It is not simply an accident of birth or circumstance, as it was for James I. For Shakespeare, a king is forged in suffering, has Christ-like qualities like compassion, whilst always winning his battles. So let's take a closer look at Edgar and how he's portrayed in the play. The first thing we notice is how little we hear from Edgar in the first part of the play. Edgar's not present at the abdication scene, Act 1, Scene 1. When he does appear in Act 1, Scene 2, he has 9 lines of dialogue, and in Act 2, Scene 1, the scene which seals Edgar's fate as a fugitive, Edgar has a grand total of 1 line, just one. And that line is, I am sure on it, not a word. It's not much to go on. It is Edmund who tells us that Edgar is a fop, that is, somebody who cares about his appearance, his clothes and hair, more than anything else, somebody who's superficial. In modern slang, a poser. Apart from the fact that Edgar falls for Edmund's trap, we don't have much information about what Edgar is like before becoming Poor Tom. Many productions of King Lear show Edgar reading a book in Act 1, Scene 2, as if reading books explains why Edgar is so naive as to fall for Edmund's plan. It's not until Act 2, Scene 3 that we hear anything substantial from Edgar at all. He tells us that everyone is looking for him, and that he's trying to evade capture, and in doing so he'll disguise himself as a mad beggar, since, quote, the Bedlam beggars are shunned by society and avoided by people. That's something yet, he says. This speech takes up the entire scene, and it's a standalone piece between 2 scenes involving Kent and Lear and Gloucester, i.e. the older generation. As the audience, we might not have worked it out yet, but by renouncing the world and becoming a beggar, Edgar takes on the role of a penitent, more normally associated with a monk or another member of a religious order. Edgar's later appearance naked except for a loincloth could not have struck Shakespeare's audience as anything other than Edgar as the figure of Christ. And Shakespeare is going to play on this theme for a large part of his portrayal of Edgar. But it isn't until Act 3 Scene 4 that we see Edgar as poor Tom. Edgar as a Christ figure. He joins up with Lear, the fool, and Kent, what Reagan has previously called Lear's, quote, desperate train. In Act 3 Scene 4, the fool mistakes Edgar, poor Tom, as, quote, a spirit and is frightened by him. When Edgar says they should run away because he's being followed by, quote, a foul fiend, this is in keeping with this plan that if he's disguised as a mad beggar, people will avoid him. Lear, of course, sees only his own situation in poor Tom, and believes that Tom has been brought to this by the betrayal of his daughters. Poor Tom regales them with a list of his problems caused by the fiend. The devil has tempted him to suicide. Lear persists in saying poor Tom has been betrayed by his daughters, and this is why he's been brought so low. Edgar enumerates the commandments, but says that he's cold. Edgar, as poor Tom, often refers to physical discomfort, like being cold or being hungry or being tired. In the past, says Edgar, as poor Tom, he was a serving man because he served his mistress, i.e. had sex with her. And then he goes through all the sins he committed in his past life. Lear takes pity on Edgar and calls him, quote, a poor, burr-forked animal. According to Lear, the mad beggar explains what man is like in reality. And of course the question of what man is recurs throughout the play. Enter Gloucester, Edgar's father, who is trying to have him killed, and Edgar, poor Tom, calls him a flibbertigibbet, the name of a demon taken from a book printed in 1603 by Samuel Harsnet, entitled A Declaration of Egregious Popish Impostures, an anti-Catholic diatribe which Shakespeare refers to several times in his portrayal of Edgar as poor Tom. Edgar also mentions Saint Withold, who cast out demons, and then Gloucester asks who is there. Edgar, poor Tom, recounts the nasty things he's had to eat, the fact that he's been whipped and imprisoned and put in the stocks, and he ends the speech with Smulkin, another demon from Harsnet's book. Modo and Mahu are other demons, and Edgar, as poor Tom, correctly points out that, quote, the Prince of Darkness is a gentleman, or at least he is in this play. All the bad people in King Lear are aristocrats, with the possible exception of Oswald. It's here that Lear decides that Edgar is a philosopher and calls him this same learned Theban. For Lear, the mad beggar is the smartest guy in the room. He asks him the cause of thunder. He also compares him to Oedipus from Sophocles' play. It's Oedipus who solves the riddle of the Sphinx. And of course, the answer to the riddle of the Sphinx is man. So Edgar is the penitent, he is Christ, he is everyman. He is the philosopher who solves the riddle of the Sphinx. He is the Athenian at the centre of learning. And Edgar, poor Tom, finishes the scene by referencing a popular medieval ballad about a young man, not yet a knight, on a quest to save his sister. And there the scene ends. There is a short scene where Edgar betrays his father, and then Act 3 Scene 6 opens with Lear, the fool, Edgar as poor Tom, in a shabby room. Kent is the only presence who's a voice of reason here. But the real genius of the scene is that it creates a three-voice tableau in which Edgar is disguised as a mad beggar, King Lear has actually gone mad, and the fool talks in riddles. It is a masterpiece of Jacobean drama. Between them, they stage a mock trial of Goneril and Regan, who are both condemned. But Lear, becoming overexcited, gets tired, and Kent lets him lie down, and Lear falls asleep. Everyone carries Lear out on a stretcher, leaving Edgar alone on the stage. Here Edgar has a speech to the audience as Edgar, which serves to emphasise to the audience that Edgar is only pretending to be a mad beggar. Edgar tells us that watching the king suffer has put his own suffering into perspective and makes his problems easier to bear. Edgar has been wronged, but so has the king, and this thing's not over yet. In Act 4, Scene 1, it starts as Act 3, Scene 6 ends, that is, with a speech by Edgar. It's apparent to the audience that although we saw very little of Edgar until Act 3, Scene 4, we've seen a lot of him since. Also, there's a shift here. Edgar's speech at the end of Act 3, Scene 6 rhymes. It's open and accessible. But the speech at the opening of Act 4 is dense and philosophical. Edgar's speech at the opening of Act 4 tells us that contempt is better than flattery, that the worst person in society can still have hope and has no need to live in fear. And in modern parlance, if you ain't got nothing, you've got nothing to lose. The two speeches at the end of Act 3, Scene 6 and the beginning of Act 4 effectively turn Edgar into a kind of chorus, a figure who comments on the action of the play for the benefit of the audience. The tone changes as Gloucester enters. Edgar's father is blind and has been tortured. The old man helping Gloucester is one of the tenants on his land. Edgar as poor Tom takes over the old man's duties guiding Gloucester, and Gloucester asks if poor Tom is naked, and when the old man says that he is, Gloucester calls for clothes for poor Tom. This is a direct reference to the Gospels, when Jesus says to the apostles, quote, "I was naked and you clothed me." It's from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25. It relates to a parable about the sheep and the goats, i.e. how the good will be separated from the evil. The important thing to remember is that Shakespeare's audience would have got the reference to Edgar as Christ straight away. In order to maintain his pretense as the mad beggar, Edgar goes back to talking about demons, and Shakespeare uses Samuel Harsnett's book as a point of reference again. Gloucester tells us that he intends to kill himself, and Edgar says, "Poor Tom shall lead thee." It's Act 4, Scene 6. Time has passed. Gloucester and Edgar are outside Dover, and Gloucester is looking for the cliff to throw himself off. Edgar tricks his father into thinking he's on a cliff, that he has thrown himself off it, and that by a miracle the gods have spared his life. Essentially, Edgar saves his father from committing suicide. This scene can seem strange to modern audiences, and it certainly works better on stage than it does on a podcast. But there are two elements here that Shakespeare uses to make this scene work. The first is the emotional power of the scene. We understand Gloucester's despair and Edgar's desire to save his father. Indeed, Edgar's compassion, despite being wronged, is especially moving. The second element is that as blind Gloucester questions what's happened to him, King Lear enters, and the scene shifts into two old men, one who's mad and the other in despair, clinging to each other in their misery. Of course, after being saved by the gods, the man that Gloucester is talking to is no longer poor Tom and the mad beggar. And so Edgar, when asked by Gloucester, "What are you?" Edgar replies in all honesty, quote, "A most poor man made tame by fortune's blows." But this question is interrupted by the entry of Oswald, who's about to kill Gloucester. But Edgar saves his father for a second time. Edgar pretends to be a peasant, but we know, of course, that he isn't. And Edgar tells Oswald to walk on by, to leave Gloucester alone. But Oswald doesn't listen. They fight, Oswald is killed, and Edgar discovers the letter on Oswald's body and realises what's really going on. Notice that it's Edgar, unlike Lear or Gloucester, who finally gets what's happening. Act 5, Edgar, still disguised, gives the letter he found on Oswald's body to the Duke of Albany before the battle. And then in Act 5, Scene 2, the battle is over, King Lear has lost, and Edgar needs to find a safe place for his father. Edgar, of course, cannot take part in the battle, because as our Christ-like figure, he can't be on the losing side. That would be blasphemous and irreligious. But now Edgar will put on his armour for Act 5, Scene 3, and the big fight scene with Edmund. Notice that no one knows who Edgar is under his armour, except of course the audience. We know that it's Edgar. And that therefore, in a way, Edgar is still in disguise. Indeed, there are a number of places in the play where Edgar is mentioned, but no one has actually seen Edgar, apart from Edmund, throughout the whole of the play. This is the first time Edgar is going to be Edgar, and we know how much he's changed because we've been following his journey. The fight is set up as two knights battling it out in an old-fashioned medieval context. Edgar even uses the word morgre, which was an archaic word even in Shakespeare's time. Of course, in this fight, Edgar cannot lose. He's our Christ-like figure, Christ the Redeemer, and he's going to be our new king, so he has to win his battles. Kings need to win battles, otherwise they don't stay kings. Once Edmund is vanquished and beaten, Edgar reveals who he is. Quote, "My name is Edgar, and thy father's son." If this is done properly on stage, it's a wonderfully dramatic moment, and Edgar backs it up with a fantastic insult on Edmund. Quote, "The dark and vicious place where thee he got cost him his eyes." That is, the sex that conceived you, Edmund, led to our father being tortured and blinded. Edgar then has a long speech explaining his journey to everyone else in the play. Many modern productions leave this out, but it serves as an extension to the reveal. And it's satisfying that Edgar is victorious and therefore gets to tell his tale. There's a reason Shakespeare gives Edgar so many lines here. It emphasises Edgar's importance to the play, from being absent in the opening scene of the play to being central to the final scene of the play. As Lear carries the body of Cordelia onto the stage, Kent tries to console him, and Lear shouts, "Prithee, away!" It's Edgar who now intervenes and says, quote, "'Tis noble Kent, your friend." And as Lear dies, it's Edgar who goes to help him, saying, "He faints, my lord, my lord." And it's Kent's turn to say to Edgar, quote, "Vex not his ghost, or let him pass." And Edgar is the one who pronounces Lear dead. Quote, "He is gone indeed." In these exchanges, Edgar takes the lead role and makes the important statements. And of course it's Edgar who has the famous last lines of the play. Quote, "The oldest hath borne most. We that are young shall never see so much, nor live so long." I hope this analysis of Edgar's role in King Lear will prove useful and illuminating, and will give you a chance to think of how the play may be Shakespeare's only double-plotted tragedy. And we'll see you next time on the Shakespeare Podcast.